Hello and welcome to Tabletop Oddity. My name is Jay and today is going to mark 1 year since Star Wars Legion was released, so I thought we'd have a bit of a retrospective and we'd have a look at what the game has brought us and what we expect to see in the future. Now before I continue with that, if you do like this video, do like the video, and if you're not already subscribed, please do consider doing that as it really does help. So what are we talking about? We're talking about Star Wars Legion, of course. And it came out on March 23rd. If I have done this correctly, today should be March 23rd, so a year or nearabouts. And it's been an interesting journey. Is it where we think, well, is it where we think it should be? Is it going to do what we want it to do? Did it do what we'd hoped? Etc, etc. So let's talk about variety. I think when Star Wars Legion came out, there was a lot of talk about the variety in the lists. And quite frankly, it wasn't necessarily the most varied choices you could have. And on one hand, that's disappointing, but on the other hand, completely understandable. You can't release a 40k game with all that amount of models and units and choice straight off the bat. Unless you're like, I mean, I was going to say Bill Gates, but Bill Gates, Google, they are probably all going to do it. It's just like, it would be very expensive. Actually, probably Google probably could, but you know what I mean? Most companies don't have that kind of money. You're not going to have 15 options for 15 different factions. That was never realistic. But I do feel like Star Wars Legion took a bit of a gamble with a few too many releases. The release variety just wasn't particularly great. We had one character, one core, one support, one heavy, and the heavy apparently was actually only because the game got delayed, and quite thankfully and quite truthfully I'm very happy that happened. I would think the game would have been a little bit in trouble if they hadn't had that options. So what do I think could have changed at the start? Right, it's alright moan about it, like what could have been the solution to that? And I think my solution to that would have been characters. The characters being one model with just the cards and stuff like that. I would presume that's easier to do than a full unit, but I don't necessarily know if that's true. And if that is the case, if my assumption there is correct, then characters like Boba Fett, Veers, Han, Jin, these kind of characters could have had a big impact in the game, even from the off, to make the game feel more varied. So that's what I personally would have liked to have seen. The list variety wasn't great, and I think that did hamper the release of Star Wars Legion. That's definitely one thing that did. However, I feel like FFG have been knocking it out of the park since then. We've had releases pretty much every month apart from maybe the Barricade month or whatever the hell that was. Yeah, we've had pretty much standard releases, one every month, and they've been pretty game-changing in a lot of senses. Not necessarily game-changing, like Wookiees just out of the blue. They don't necessarily change, it's not like you see them in every single game, but it adds that variety and it's game-changing in the sense that we went from a limited pool to now quite a varied pool, and I'm very happy about that. You know, from the start we had, well, the first wave we had Veers and Leia, and those characters still obviously get played today and still quite potent. If anything, the one character I think really got was a bit hurt at launch was Vader. I feel like Vader might have been a bit weak-ish. He can be strong, so I've had that conversation before, but he was the one that was stood out a little bit. And you know, that Leia and Luke list is still really potent today. Veers and Bubba, quite a potent list. Even Bubba added to a Vader list is still quite decent. So yeah, the characters made a lot of difference there. The core troops, yes and no, made a lot of difference. For the snowtroopers, you see them quite regularly now. At first people were a bit like resistant to that as an idea, but the flame has now sort of grown in popularity, and the fleets are generally like a 1 or 2 unit in some lists where, you know, I think they're not quite as prevalent as the snowtroopers. Yeah, and we've just had more and more stuff. Wookiees, Royal Guard, and one of the ones that you see quite a lot, which has been a big change to the meta, was the sniper teams. They have been not ubiquitous, but they are quite common. Just because they're so easy to get into lists and they're so cheap and they're so powerful, they were really quite useful at the start. But then you sort of see the meta change over time. Yes, they came out, but then we started seeing multi-wound units. So are the snipers now less effective because they don't actually kill models and stuff like that? So it's been interesting to see the ebb and flow of the meta. Just when you think one thing is happening, it turns out FFG have been playing us all along and they'll add this. It's like red defense dice have been really powerful for Imperials, so we're going to add Pierce, and now you've got to worry if your red defense dice are useful. Armor's not very good, so we're going to add some more vehicles. Oh, maybe now you want to use iron. It's like they're playing 4D chess and I'm playing checkers, as whatever Kanye said or whatever it was. Yeah, the ebb and flow of the meta has been fantastic. The release schedule has been fantastic. The releases themselves have all pretty much been good. I can't think of anything that has come out that I've never seen on the table, apart from even the Earthspeeder, which is not particularly great. Everything generally gets a fair crack at the whip. Somebody at an event will be running it. And that's fantastic. I think the game variety is much better now. And I wish we had, like, if we had everything now at release last year, nobody would have been able to complain about variety apart from the fact that we had 2 factions. 2 factions is something that we know is changing, and we're probably going to get information soon. And that is going to completely change Star Wars Legion. It's going to be mega important that we have these Clone Wars, decent factions, good models. It's going to get a lot of people to look at the game again, and it's really going to, you know, that's a make or break kind of situation. Now, you could have argued, like, what's the bother about the Resistance to tie in with the new films? To do the Clone Wars to tie in with the series is perhaps a little bit like, what are you doing? But, you know, I'm sure that will all come. That universe isn't going to go anywhere. The Resistance era kind of universe isn't going to go anywhere. So that's a little bit for the future. One thing I've often mentioned about, I do think the release of Star Wars Legion was slightly hampered by the announcement of X-Wing 2.0. X-Wing 2.0 got announced about a month and a half after Star Wars Legion came out, and I just feel like that was a little bit too close. You could make the argument that some people were like, well, I don't want to play 2.0 X-Wing, so I'm going to play Legion instead. But a lot of people are like, I'll probably now just play X-Wing because that sounds like a game I can get into a bit easier. Something that I wish FFG didn't do, but that's just the way it is. Overall, the popularity of Legion possibly hasn't been what a lot of people have expected. A lot of people are like, oh, it's dead in my area or whatever. The reality is, it's still a really popular game. It's not as popular as 40k. Probably, I mean, it might never be. It would require something amazing to happen, like FFG just dominating and GW sinking, but it's unlikely to be ever as big as 40k, and that's fine as long as it's reasonably popular. And I think a lot of people don't understand how releases on average go. Generally you have like a big boon at the start, massive hype, and then it decreases as all the people who were like just casually interested fade out, and then you have your baseline. But that baseline generally then tends to trend on a game that's going to succeed, will generally tend to trend upwards. And I think I personally noticed that, like, initial release and then hype and all that kind of stuff, fine, then it faded, and now I feel like we're in the slow growth era. And it seems to be getting more and more popular. And I think the Clone Wars and those kind of releases are really going to have another boon, and then your baseline will be higher, and then we'll have another boon and the baseline will be higher. I think that will happen. I'm pretty confident that's going to be the case. So that's like, I mean, the main points in this video is that we've had the game started off, it perhaps wasn't like, you know, it was a big success at the time, but then it sort of faded, and I feel like it's going back. And I think part of that was the release variety. There just perhaps wasn't enough, but that has been rectified as quickly as possible. Moving forward, we're going to be getting the Clone Wars, and that should be a serious impact on the game. More factions is something you'll often hear talked about, and that makes sense. To have 2 factions, you can feel a bit like, oh, you've seen this game already, even though the list variety in those factions has been greatly increased. Still having different factions with different playstyles and all that kind of stuff would be pretty interesting. Like the droids, I'm expecting maybe like cheap droids, so you could have a horde army, you know what I mean. You could have like a really shooty, really tanky. You could even have a creature army at some point. Like these kind of things could happen, and once that happens, you then have a fully fledged, complete, compact war game that, you know, I think everybody will be able to find something they like in there. Because at the minute, like, the difference in playstyle between Rebels and Imperials, it's there. Like, Imperials are a bit more forgiving in terms of defense dice, but the Rebels shooting's a little bit better, but you've got to be careful and use your dodges and stuff. It's like, at this stage they play near enough the same that I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about it if you were like googling faction playstyle for Star Wars Legion. Pretty much the same. But hopefully that will change, and yeah, I'm pretty sure it will change, because I think we are imminently going to be seeing stuff about the Clone Wars. I just can't see it not being soon, within the next month, probably next Thursday from Adepticon. I think it's not almost guaranteed, but I think it's pretty likely. For me personally, for the channel, Legion has been the dominating factor of the channel. It's the game I've enjoyed the most. I think the reality is, I feel like the game is better than it's getting credit for, and I think that was generally to do with the list variety, which, as I said, was fixed and is being even fixed more. And yeah, Legion is what when it got announced, I was like, oh, I'm interested in that game. And when I played it, I'm like, I really, really like this game. Like, this is my game. Whereas if I compare that to something like Kill Team, it was like, Kill Team's alright. Not really that into it. Kill Team's alright. That was essentially the tone of that. Was Legion has been a game where I've been enthralled from the off, and I feel like I will be enthralled until the end, which hopefully will be never. But I guess all things must die. Not necessarily true, I guess. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Either way, I think Legion's it's done well for me personally. My channel growth has been thanks to Legion, thanks to you guys, obviously the combination of the two. And I feel like Legion this I think will be a pivotal year. If you release new factions and Clone Wars and it's just tanks, then that could be the end of Legion. You might not see you might not see as many resources going into it. However, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be successful. So it's been a year since Legion has been released. How have you got on? How have you found the game? Have you liked it? Did you go out of it, come back, sell your army, get back? I know somebody who's done that who might be on the channel at some point. Let me know your thoughts, how the game has been over the year, and let me know what you really, really would like to see in the next year. I think you're only going to see Clone Wars in the next year. If they've gone for more factions beyond that, it'll be like a year and a bit. Right, probably a year and a half, I guess. That would be the timeline I would expect for that. And hopefully I'd like to see Clone Wars and then more factions and then more factions. Because the reality is, then the hobby, you can pick a faction and your speed of having to paint that and sort that slows down. I mean, you can just be excited to look at new stuff and play against new stuff. That's my thoughts. It's been a year. The year of Legion. Not quite the year of Legion. Maybe this will be the year of Legion. I feel like it might be. As I said, let me know how it's gone for you, what you're looking forward to. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. By the way, I've not eaten all day. My tummy's been grumbling. I hope you've not been able to hear it. And I've just had KFC, which always upsets my tummy. So I may have to go to the bathroom pretty immediately. Have a beautiful day though, and goodbye. Bye guys.